Welcome back, Year 5. In today's reading lesson, we are finishing Fantastic Mr. Fox, so we're reading chapters 17 and 18. We're not doing a very tough lesson today. In fact, you're not really supposed to have school today, but I really thought you'd want to hear the end of the story. So all we're going to do is review the book when we're done. For the book review, we'll be using this sheet. You should have received about 8 of them in the packet that you collected from school. Some of you might have a book review sheet that looks slightly different, but that's absolutely fine. You can use that one too. All right, so the last time we read, we finished chapter 16. In that chapter, Mr. Fox, Badger, and the smallest fox just barely escaped from Bean's secret cider cellar. The woman who worked for Bean had come down to collect some of those jars for him, and remember, they were hiding behind those jars. Fortunately, she didn't take enough for them to be seen, so they got away. Now they're headed back for the feast. Chapter 17, The Great Feast. Back in the tunnel, they paused so that Mr. Fox could brick up the hole in the wall. He was humming to himself as he put the bricks back in place. "I can still taste that glorious cider," he said. "What an impudent fellow Rat is." "He has bad manners," Badger said. "All rats have bad manners. I've never met a polite rat yet." "And he drinks too much," said Mr. Fox, putting the last brick in place. "There we are. Now home to the feast." They grabbed their jars of cider and off they went. Mr. Fox was in front, the smallest fox came next, and Badger last. Along the tunnel they flew, past the turning that led to Boonce's mighty storehouse, past Boggis's chicken house number 1, and then up the long home stretch towards the place where they knew Mrs. Fox would be waiting. "Keep it up, my darlings!" shouted Mr. Fox. "We'll soon be there. Think what's waiting for us at the other end, and just think what we're bringing home with us in these jars. That ought to cheer up poor Mrs. Fox." Mr. Fox sang a little song as he ran. "Home again swiftly I glide, back to my beautiful bride. She'll not feel so rotten as soon as she's gotten some cider inside her inside." Then Badger joined in. "Oh, poor Mrs. Badger," he cried. "So hungry she very near died. But she'll not feel so hollow if only she'll swallow some cider inside her inside." They were still singing as they rounded the final corner and burst in upon the most wonderful and amazing sight any of them had ever seen. The feast was just beginning. A large dining room had been hollowed out of the earth, and in the middle of it, seated around a huge table, were no less than 29 animals. They were Mrs. Fox and 3 small foxes, Mrs. Badger and 3 small badgers, Mole and Mrs. Mole and 4 small moles, Rabbit and Mrs. Rabbit and 5 small rabbits, Weasel and Mrs. Weasel and 6 small weasels. The table was covered with chickens and ducks and geese and hams and bacon, and everyone was tucking into the lovely food. "My darling!" cried Mrs. Fox, jumping up and hugging Mr. Fox. "We couldn't wait. Please forgive us." Then she hugged the smallest fox of all, and Mrs. Badger hugged Badger, and everyone hugged everyone else. Amid shouts of joy, the great jars of cider were placed upon the table, and Mr. Fox and Badger and the smallest fox sat down with the others. You must remember no one had eaten a thing for several days. They were ravenous. So for a while there was no conversation at all. There was only the sound of crunching and chewing as the animals attacked the succulent food. At last Badger stood up. He raised his glass of cider and called out, "A toast! I want you all to stand and drink a toast to our dear friend who has saved our lives this day, Mr. Fox." "To Mr. Fox!" they all shouted, standing up and raising their glasses. "To Mr. Fox! Long may he live!" Then Mrs. Fox got shyly to her feet and said, "I don't want to make a speech. I just want to say one thing, and it is this. My husband is a fantastic fox." Everyone clapped and cheered. Then Mr. Fox himself stood up. "This delicious meal," he began, then he stopped. In the silence that followed, he let fly a tremendous belch. There was laughter and more clapping. "This delicious meal, my friends," he went on, "is by courtesy of Messrs. Boggis, Boonce, and Bean." More cheering and laughter. "And I hope you have enjoyed it as much as I have." He let fly another colossal belch. "Better out than in," said Badger. "Thank you," said Mr. Fox, grinning hugely. But now, my friends, let us be serious. Let us think of tomorrow, and the next day, and the days after that. If we go out, we will be killed, right? Right, they shouted. We'll be shot before we've gone a yard, said Badger. Exactly, said Mr. Fox. But who wants to go out anyway? Let me ask you that. We are all diggers, every one of us. We hate the outside. The outside is full of enemies. We only go out because we have to get food for our families. But now, my friends, we have an entirely new setup. We have a safe tunnel leading to three of the finest stores in the world. We do indeed, said Badger. I've seen him. And you know what this means, said Mr. Fox. It means that none of us need ever go out into the open again. There was a buzz of excitement around the table. I therefore invite you all, Mr. Fox went on, to stay here with me forever. Forever? They cried. My goodness, how marvelous! And Rabbit said to Mrs. Rabbit, my dear, just think, we're never going to be shot at again in our lives. We will make, said Mr. Fox, a little underground village with streets and houses on each side, separate houses for badgers and moles and rabbits and weasels and foxes. And every day I will go shopping for you all. And every day we will eat like kings. The cheering that followed the speech went on for many minutes. Chapter 18. Still Waiting. Outside the fox's hole, Boggis and Boonce and Bean sat beside their tents with their guns on their laps. It was beginning to rain. Water was trickling down the necks of the three men and into their shoes. He won't stay down there much longer now, Boggis said. The brute must be famished, Boone said. That's right, Bean said. He'll be making a dash for it any moment. Keep your guns handy. They sat there by the hole, waiting for the fox to come out. And so far as I know, they're still waiting. And that, my darlings, is the end of Fantastic Mr. Fox by Roald Dahl. Down below, I want you guys to just write a quick sentence about how you feel about that ending. I really like how they ended with the farmers still waiting by the hole because I think that's hilarious. But I kind of feel like, I don't know. I don't know if I expected a little bit more from the foxes and the badgers and everybody down having the feast. I don't know if I just wanted something more for them. This is the second time I've read this book, and I just feel like I wish the ending was a little different. You tell me what you think in the comments down below. Now, your independent work is this book review sheet. I'm sure all of you have done at least one of these before. I've given this to you as homework, I think, in term 1, so it should be a familiar sheet to you. Perhaps something that will be tricky for this book using this form is that when it says plot, it only gives you space for 3 events. So you're going to have to think very carefully about how you would sum up this story into only 3 events. And notice the lines are quite short. I think that's a really good test for you to see if you can capture the biggest ideas of this story. Think, what was the most important thing from the beginning, the most important thing from the middle, and the most important thing from the end. The setting you can capture on that line. You don't need to go overboard with a paragraph. Notice they just give you space for about a sentence. For the character, I encourage you to pick a character that you really liked because it only gives you space to write about one character and to discuss their traits and draw a picture of them and so forth. So pick a character that you really enjoyed. As for the rest of it, it's pretty straightforward. Fill it in nice and neatly. If you have crayons or color pencils at home, make sure you decorate, and I would love to get a picture of this one. All right, you guys, that's it. You know the drill. Stay safe, and I'll see you soon.